When Richard Petty left Plymouth, it sent shockwaves through NASCAR. To win the king back, they built a car with a giant wing and speed so crazy that NASCAR would eventually change the rules because of it. This is how the 1970 Superbird, the wild-winged hero, brought racing's greatest star back home. NASCAR's biggest star slammed the door on Plymouth in 1969. Why? Well, because Richard Petty wanted a winged car, but while Plymouth said no, Ford eagerly said yes. Petty wasn't just another driver, though. He was the king, NASCAR royalty. His blue number 43 cars were instantly recognizable, and his fans were everywhere. And now, he was driving a Ford Torino Talladega, leaving Plymouth in the dust. Meanwhile, Plymouth's sister company Dodge had created the Charger Daytona with a pointed nose cone and massive rear wing. It was the first NASCAR car to break 200 miles per hour. The Daytona was winning races that Plymouth could only dream of. Plymouth watched as Dodge got all the glory with their winged car, and as Richard Petty won races in a Ford, clearly something had to change. Plymouth made a decision that would change NASCAR forever. They would build the most extreme race car possible and bring the king back home. Engineers started with the Plymouth Roadrunner and transformed it into a racing monster. They didn't just copy the Charger Daytona, they improved on it. The Superbird got a 23-inch nose cone that was sleeker than the Daytonas. The rear wing stood 58 inches tall, purposely made that height so the trunk could still open. Under the hood, the racing version packed the legendary 426 Hemi V8 engine. That's 426 cubic inches of raw American power. The sound was unmistakable. It was a thunderous roar that could be heard from miles away. The road version came with 3 engine options. The top-level 426 Hemi made 425 horsepower and could hit 143 miles per hour. Only 135 Superbirds were built with this engine, making them incredibly rare today. The car wasn't just fast. It looked like nothing else on the road. Plymouth had one goal: get Richard Petty back into their cars. They showed him the Superbird and the king's eyes lit up. This was exactly what he wanted, a winged warrior that could dominate NASCAR. Petty returned to Plymouth for the 1970 season, bringing his famous number 43 with him. The deal was sealed. The Superbird would be Petty Blue and the king would be behind the wheel. NASCAR rules required Plymouth to build street versions of any car they raced, and at least one car for every 2 Plymouth dealerships. That meant over 1,900 Superbirds had to be built and sold to the public. Regular people could now buy the same car Richard Petty raced on Sundays. When the 1970 NASCAR season started, the Superbird screamed onto the track and changed everything. The sound was deafening. The sight was unforgettable. That massive wing cutting through the air, that pointed nose slicing through the wind. Richard Petty's number 43 Superbird became an instant icon. The results were exactly what Plymouth hoped for. Petty won 8 races in the Superbird that season. Other Plymouth drivers added 10 more wins. That's 18 total victories in a single season. The winged warrior was unstoppable. The Superbird's most famous moment came at the Wilkes 400 in North Carolina, where Petty's car was simply unstoppable. He led 308 laps out of 400 and finished 2 full laps ahead of second place. With the king rightfully back in his place, the Superbird became his throne. NASCAR had a problem, though. The winged cars were simply too fast and too dominant. Something had to change. By mid-1970, NASCAR officials were concerned. The speeds were exceeding what track safety could handle. Tires of that era weren't designed for sustained running at 180 plus miles per hour, and there were fears that a serious accident was inevitable if speeds continued to climb. For 1971, NASCAR created new rules targeting these aero cars. Any car with the Hemi engine was limited to 305 cubic inches, down from 426. Alternatively, they could keep their big engines but would be forced to carry much more weight. The Superbird's advantage was gone. The rule change was clearly aimed at the winged warriors. NASCAR never officially admitted they were targeting the Superbird in Daytona, but the message was clear. The birds had flown too high, too fast. Plymouth engineers considered their options. They built prototypes of a 1971 Superbird that complied with the new rules, but the math didn't work. With a smaller engine, the car would be underpowered, and with more weight, it would be uncompetitive. Plymouth couldn't make the numbers work under the new rules, and though the Superbird's reign was short, it remained unforgettable. Richard Petty moved on to other Plymouth models. The era of the Winged Warriors had ended as quickly as it began, but the legend of the Winged Warrior lived on. NASCAR had literally changed the rules because the Superbird and its Dodge cousin were too fast and too dominant. The car that brought Richard Petty back to Plymouth became a legend. Today, an original Superbird can sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the rare Hemi versions go for millions. In January of 2019, a Hemi Superbird sold at auction for $1.65 million. A car that dealers couldn't give away in 1970 had become one of the most valuable muscle cars on Earth. The very features that made it hard to sell originally, that wing and that nose, now make it instantly recognizable and highly desirable. Today, finding an all-original Superbird is nearly impossible. Of the approximately 1,920 built, experts estimate that fewer than 1,000 exist today. Each one is meticulously documented, its history traced, its originality verified. Its unmistakable profile, that nose and that wing, has become one of the most recognizable shapes in automotive history because nothing before or since has looked quite like the Superbird. The Superbird has appeared in pop culture too. It starred in the Disney Pixar film Cars as the character the King, a direct reference to Richard Petty, who even voiced the character. A whole new generation discovered the Winged Warrior through this animated tribute. But the sound is what people remember most. The earth-shaking rumble of that Hemi V8 engine. When a Superbird fires up today, heads still turn, crowds still gather, because that sound alone takes people back to 1970. At car shows across America, the Superbird draws crowds like few other vehicles. People who weren't even born when it raced are drawn to its outrageous styling and incredible history. They may have never seen one race, but they know what it represents. A moment when Plymouth would do anything to bring the king back. Only 1,000 Superbirds exist today, rarely driven and barely ever seen. Each one is a rolling piece of NASCAR history that tells the story of how Plymouth went to extreme lengths to bring the king back home. The Superbird lived for just one season, but its impact was eternal. A car so fast that NASCAR changed the rules, a design so wild that it still turns head 50 years later, and a sound so powerful that once you hear it, you never forget it.